No, I'm an addict. You know, I always like to pick the early morning workshops to share because I'm tired. You know, and I tend to share better when I'm tired. You know, I don't have a lot of defenses up. This workshop is solution through the steps. You know, and I've been thinking about this. I know, Friday I thought about it. And I always think about how I was before I came into Narcotics Anonymous. And how I handle situations in my life, you know. And I have to talk about some chaos and some confusion, you know. Growing up, how we handled things in our house was we didn't deal with them. We pretended things didn't happen. We pretended things didn't exist, you know. I really enjoyed listening to the speaker last night. You know, I love it when I hear my story, you know, and I love it when I see other people have worked through similar issues, you know, and they're able to come and they share it with us, you know. So I sat there and I listened to him talk about the abuse and the neglect in his life, and I said, man, I can ID with that, you know, and that's wonderful. You know, but growing up, you know, the thing is first we're taught that children ought to be seen and not heard, you know, and that's a lot different now, but when I was growing up, that's what it was, you know, and if you spoke, you were backhanded in the mouth instantly, and that was kind of how you took things, so you learned really early in life, or at least I did, that you don't talk about things. You don't deal with things. Things just didn't happen, you know. And there was a lot of stuff that happened. So I had no skills in reference to handling problems. Because when I looked at the topic, it said solution. So evidently there had to be problems for us to seek solutions for, you know. So how I handled problems in my life was I stuffed them. When I share this, a lot of people never believe it, but I was a very shy person, you know. I just call it terminally shy because I was not able to express the smallest emotion. Being able just to say hello to people in the morning was a major deal for me, you know. No less give them a smile or a hug, you know. It's amazing to me when I sit and I talk in front of people and I think about that little girl, you know, and I'm not talking about a little girl from, you know, 20, 30 years ago. I'm talking to somebody just recently, you know, in the last 6, 7 years, that was not able to do these things in her life. Most of the times people can't get me to shut up. Now, I don't know. But I always wonder what it is that I'm saying and if it's the right thing. Narcotics Anonymous, you know, people talk about I have a life in Narcotics Anonymous, and I really don't believe that I actually lived until I started this program. So I walked in the door and I found that freedom, and I found that place where I finally fit in. And I really appreciate the people in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous for all that they've given me. You know, they've actually given me a person. Because I was always a shadow of someone else. You know, and when I share, I always talk about, you know, that stuff that really makes me scared right here. Because you people have taught me that in doing that, there's growth, you know. And it was always real important for me to change because I didn't like who I was. I didn't like anything about me. And I love me today. I think I'm a pretty good girl. And I like that. I like being able to say that. So I didn't get that reinforcement as a child. I was always the bad, stupid, ugly, and a lot of other nasty little words, that they kind of like to throw in there. And I know, I'm pretty happy. How I used to handle situations, and I'll give examples. Very simple little task. When I was in high school, my dad was an addict, and I remember him telling me, he said, I've been shooting dope since I was 13, and I'm gonna die shooting dope, and he did, he did, and I thought when he died that, wow, what a relief, at least he's gone. And I remember coming home from school one day, and I had this $5, and this $5 was supposed to buy dinner, because his priority was not about feeding and clothing the 6 of us. Those are 6 of us. His priority was getting and using and finding ways and means to get more, and I had some way or another in between school and home lost this $5, and I had no way of dealing with that, because all I knew was no one was going to eat that night, and that I was going to get beat when he got home, And my way of handling this situation was I sat on the porch of my house with a piece of glass digging into my arm, hoping that I would die before he got home. And I still have this scar on my arm, and well, I don't think I've ever shared that with anybody but my sponsor. I love this place. And I sat there till my brother came home, and he smacked me and he said, "What are you doing? And it's never going to be that bad. And you don't have to do this." But those were my coping skills. It was always better to die than deal. Always. I sat and just contemplated that life should not be this hard, and that there had to be a better place, and this wasn't it. So that was always my first impulse, my first reaction to anything that caused me fear, pain. It was always living. I don't need to live through this, And that kind of thinking really hasn't died. I have these other tools and these other solutions in my life. But the thing that amazes me is that, my disease comes at me not about getting high today. It comes at me, you'd be better off dead. And that's always that distant echo in the back of my head, when things just aren't going the way I want them to. Run your car in the wall, no. It'll be easier. It'll be quick. It'll be over. Today, I have this thing called Narcotics Anonymous in my life. And it's everything today. You know, it gives me that energy to get up in the morning. It gives me that smile on my face. I have people in my life. I have a sponsor, you know, and I've had many in the 10 years that I've been clean. But this woman is just what I need when I need it, you know. She gives it to me really straight. She cuts it to the chase. And a lot of times I need that, and I think a lot of people don't think that about me, you know, when they talk to me, and I'm a good listener. And I had a sponsee tell me last night, said, you know, I was hoping I'd get to go home with at least half my ass still chewed on, you know, and I'm like, what are you talking about, you know? And I really didn't think I came across like that, but my sponsor comes across like that to me. You know, she just gives it to me straight from the hip, and I truly appreciate that. You know, a lot of times I spend too much time in my head. She tells me, you know, you're a beautiful, intelligent woman, and sometimes that's one of our defects of character, because we spend a lot of time up in our heads, you know, analyzing every little thing. You know, I call it that mental masturbation. Oh, and I'm good at it, you know. Right up to that point where I turn it over and say, okay, God, whatever. You know, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You know, I'm willing to participate today. And I show up today, you know. I show up and I come prepared. You know, I go to meetings. I sponsor women. And that's a really amazing joy in my life, you know. I appreciate having the opportunity to give what was so freely given to me, you know. And it pains me when I see women in pain. It touches the real center of my being, you know, because I've had an opportunity to work through some issues. I've had an opportunity to work through, you know, incest issues, you know, physical violence as a child and in my adult life. You know, the thing is, the reality is that, you know, when we start looking at the things that we've had to deal with in our childhood, and if we don't start working on these same issues in recovery, we're doomed to repeat them. You know, my first husband was my father. And he hated it when I told him that. But when I saw him, and I said, you are my father. I said, you are the same person in my life, the same abusive person, you know. But, and not being able to have, you know, the sense of who I am today, I allowed myself to stay in that relationship because I felt that I deserved still to be abused, still to be, you know, or play that role of the victim, you know. I choose not to be the victim today, you know. Which is a pretty neat thing. It saddens me when I still see it in other women's lives that I love. It really saddens me. You know, but what I've learned in this program is that, you know, I have to do this for myself, and I can't do it for anybody else. And even when I have to, you know, sit and watch the pain in others, all I can do is share my strength, hope, and experience. My experience has been in Narcotics Anonymous is nothing changes, nothing changes. You know, and if I don't have the willingness to take a look at all those dark and scary places, you know, that I don't want to go, then it won't ever change. There was a time where I thought that those dark and scary places were just too overwhelming and too deep and too dark for me. You know. But I have steps in my life. You know, and my sponsor says, you know, Wow, Mo, you're truly amazing with the willingness that you have and how far you're willing to go for yourself. And sometimes I need to hear that because I'm still my worst critic and I don't believe it at times. And I don't know how far I've come until I've had another addict in recovery look at me and say, you're really doing a lot better with that. I thought I was sitting there, I was thinking this morning, I said I had no idea about what it was that I wanted to share. I do know that living this program becomes kind of second nature when you do it on a daily basis. And I know for me in my life today that there is no problem too big or too great that my God can't handle. I have had to deal with some relationship type issues recently, primarily with some women in my life, and those tend to be the most important to me, are the women in my life, because coming into this program I didn't have women in my life. They were not important. I didn't know how to manipulate and control them, so I didn't want to have anything to do with them. But the women in this program has taught me that my lifeline is other women in this program. And they're the ones that I need. They're the ones that are going to tell me, well, you're really messing up today. They're going to shoot it to me real straight. They're not going to sugarcoat it. They're not going to, because they're not going to have the alternative motive. And I'm not going to say that all men have alternative motives when they're standing and smiling in your face. But, yeah. But, we won't go there. But, at least I know, when a woman is bringing something to me, it's out of love and concern. And that's not always true. She might bring it to me just out of some animosity, but the only thing that I could do is handle it, and I've had to deal with some issues, just in the last few weeks with women in my life that I truly love, that no matter what they do, I will love them unconditionally. No matter how much they hurt themselves, I will love them, And it's really amazing to me, where before I would have been enraged, we got to go, we need to talk about this, I will hunt you down, we got to sit down, blah, 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 blah. Today it's, hey, I love you anyway. It's okay. And I'll be there when you come back, And that's the neat thing about this program is that, it always comes back around. I've had an opportunity in recovery, and I had a woman that was very close to me, got angry with me because I was not willing to do some things for her to help her take care of herself. And she proceeded to tell me, well, I'm not going to hug you, I'm not going to talk to you, we're not going to be close anymore. And I told her, I said, that's okay. I truly believe that people come into my life today for a reason and a season, and I am not the one to say which that is, So when people choose not to be a part of my life, I can't do nothing about that. I truly believe that God works in everything, whether I want Him to or not, everything. And though it may hurt to lose people, when I came here Friday and I was sitting and I'm looking and there was so many people that weren't here, that are normally here, and I miss them. I just say a prayer and I say, God, I hope I see them at some point. And if I don't, I always remember what we have that was good. I find a lot of joy in the good times that I can remember instead of focusing on what I don't have today. You know? I truly believe that God brings good to me every day. And I don't know why I have certain people in my life. I used to think that I did. I used to think that I could read everyone that came across my path. And I knew what they wanted, when they wanted it. And I was able to, even second guess their thinking and what they were going to say. And I told an addict a couple of years ago, I said, I don't have a crystal ball anymore. I broke it. It just takes up too much energy, too much time. My focus is just staying in the moment. And sometimes that's real hard to do. It's real hard to do. I've had to, in the last few years, make some really serious decisions. About school and about buying a home and, those everyday things that we addicts aren't used to doing. So they become major problems. And I would just obsess. And I'd spend days letting it roll over in my head until I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And I had to look at this process because I would take every situation and do that. And I was real concerned about making the right decision in the right time, Last month I was real obsessing about going to World. And I'm thinking, well, if I move this here and I do that and I manipulate this and if I could just get a little bit more money from here, I can do this, And it was very consuming because it was something I wanted. And I'm like, how dare me not get what I want? But I had to look at how much energy and time that I was actually putting in this process. And for what? And I said, God, it'd be real nice if you allowed me to go. I said, but if you don't, that'll be okay too. And at that point of surrender, it was a wonderful feeling, It was like I didn't have to struggle with that anymore. And people keep asking me, you're not going to work? I'm like, no. And it's okay, And that's just how I handle situations today. I just let it go. I had wanted to share about where I'm at today, though, and an issue. And I've been talking about it a little bit this weekend, and with some people. And I've made a decision to take a second job. And in addition to the full-time job I have now. And I guess my issue has been with it is that I'll be working from 8 in the morning to 11 at night, 5 days a week. And that, and I thought about, well, Dad, Momo, that's your home group, that's gone. And I had to look at, okay, so what are you going to have to give up to do this? And I've already been talking to my sponsees because, I'm real adamant about step work. And when a woman asks me to sponsor her, I tell them, we don't have to be friends, we don't have to be buddies. I said, but if you have willingness to work the steps, then that's what we will do. And it's like, I'm not going to sponsor you if you're not willing to put a pen to paper and start looking at you. Because that's what you guys did for me. That's what my sponsor did with me. A lot of times they get real pissed off because, I tell them, I said, you didn't get that question. And they don't like to hear that because I'll make them do it again, because it's not about us looking good. It's about us saving our lives today. And, when a woman asks me to sponsor them, I feel as though it's my responsibility to help them get this program. So I'm already talking to them because they do step work regularly, and if it's not once a month, I'm doing step work with one of my sponsees. So I'm looking at, how I'm going to be able to keep being able to do that with them and keep being able to do my meetings, And that's a little scary for me, to be able to say, okay, well, Mo, financially, you need to be responsible here. But then this other stuff is responsible for me, My recovery is me. It's who I am today. And I don't sit and talk about Narcotics Anonymous day in and day out because I live it. I live it in every action that I have today. And I'm real comfortable with that. I talk about life and living life on life's terms. So I have some concerns of doing this in my schedule, and also I'm in graduate school, and I decided I wasn't going to take classes this summer so I can work this other job. And it's real nice to be able to sit here and just talk about that, because normally that would be just in my head, And I'd listen to people and they, tell me their concerns about it. But the more I talk about it, the more probably at ease I get about actually doing it. And actually I start Tuesday with this new job, so it'll be interesting to see. And I was telling the addict last night that, and if I can't do it, I can't do it. And new people have taught me how to say, I can't do it. Just that simply, and not feel bad about myself, not feel like a failure. I just can't do it. And I think that's okay. I really enjoy being at this place, at this camp out on this weekend. I can't imagine being anyplace else. And I've always said that this is kind of how I start my year. This is where the year starts for me. And this is the first time since I've been coming. I think I've come to the last 5. The first time that I've been here that I haven't been in a lot of pain when I came through the gate. So that's really kind of different for me. Because normally by the time I pull up through the gate and open the door and step on the ground, I'm like, hallelujah, help me, Because it's just that bad. It's like the world out there is like, whoa. Well, the past year has been so hard for me. And God has given me so many challenges. And I came through. And the thing is that the more successful I am in every venture that I have, the more experience I have at being successful. So I have this idea that there isn't anything me and my God can't do. And it works really wonderful. So when I get faced with a situation or a problem, there's always the automatic solution. God's working in this. And no matter what, it'll be okay. And I believe that in my heart today. I remember when it used to be just words, but I feel it. When I don't get the job that I want, when I don't get the promotion that I want, God says maybe it wasn't for me. I believe it. He has something better in store for me. And He has brought me so far. So far. And the thing that is so powerful is that I have so much further to go. And I can see that. And that's wonderful to be able to have vision today. And I don't have to be lost in my dark little corner of despair. I appreciate you guys being here. Thanks.
All right. I'm Ken, a recovering addict. We get about 20 minutes, and before we open the floor for sharing, I need to remind everyone that we are being taped, and if you wish not to be taped, please let me know, and the tape can be turned off. Well, the nervous sheet's back in. So we said we have about 20 minutes for anyone who wants to come up and share. The floor is open.
I'm Chris, and I'm an addict.
Hey, Chris.
I had the pleasure of meeting Mo a couple years back at Tuesday's your home group, I believe. Yeah, at the Tuesday night meeting in our area, and I was saying, geez, if there are going to be more men and women like this around the program, this is going to be awesome. And I found out, kind of that she's a diamond in the rough, and. Once again, new to the program and having expectations about, that there's going to be all these crystal clear addicts with visions and recovery and all this, and, there's some good recovery in this woman, and she gives me an example that despite all that's stewing beneath the surface, and I know that she's no exception like any of us, anyone else, that we have to deal with a lot of problems and struggles in our lives, but it's how she processes these challenges in her life, that I just draw a lot of strength from. And no matter what she'll tell you, she carries peace and she carries some resolution to the issues that she faces. And I'm selfish about this. This just helps me. I mean, it helps me so much in my recovery. And you're a gift to be around, and it is through the steps that the solution is there, because you've attacked the chaos and working through all the problems through the steps. And it's awesome to have you as a friend, and thank you for staying around. That's all I had to say.
Thanks, Chris. Hi everybody, my name's Bob. I'm a grateful recovering addict. Sometimes. And I just want to know what his motive was, Mo. See, somebody was listening. I'm going to keep it short today. Definitely step through the solution, but I can't think my way into better behavior. I have to behave my way into better thinking. Thanks. Thanks, Bob. Hi, Lenny.
I gotta say a little something here. This is my first time here. I got to share where I'm at today, and I'm in a very good place. All right. As I say, I'm an addict, and I'm also allergic to drugs. And I'll tell y'all a little bit about that. But I just want to say that I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful that you all are here. And this place here is something special about it, because when I walked on the grounds and I started meeting people and interacting with people, I saw that it was special. It's amazing when you can walk around and you don't feel like you don't belong. You see, I feel like I belong here. Everybody that approach me or that I approach, we all on the same trail, and that we trying to get better. And there's no color, And man, I said, wow, this is really nice. When we can come together and hug each other and really mean it. You can tell when somebody hugs you and don't mean it. And you know what I'm saying? But when you get these hugs around here, man, you can feel the love, you know. And I just came to say that I'm grateful. And let me go back to the part about I said that I was allergic to drugs. You know, because every time that I noticed that I used drugs, I broke out in the handcuffs. I broke out in the jails. I broke out in the fights. You know what I'm saying? And that wasn't a good feeling, you know. And I was broke. But I just want to thank my sponsorship family, my sponsor back there, Robert, and he's like my co-sponsor, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, he's the type of guy, Robert over here, he's the type of guy, if he see you out somewhere, he'll pull you over and say, man, how you doing? Your sponsor looking for you. I said, oh, okay. you know what I'm saying? Give your sponsor a call, you know what I'm saying? And that was good because when I first came to the program, I didn't ever call my sponsor. My sponsor would always call me, you know what I'm saying? And I said, damn, so I go home, give him a call, and just touching bases. Now, I'm in a habit of calling him, because it's like I'm in a habit of going to these meetings. And if I don't call my sponsor, I just don't feel right, man. You know what I'm saying? If I don't go to a meeting, I don't feel right, you know. Now I have a sponsee, you know, and it's something different. You know, it's something different for me because the only thing I can do is follow the same trail, the same tradition that my sponsor did to me, for me. You know what I'm saying? So now I feel like some eyes is on me, you know. So it makes me a better person, you know. And I'm not going to hold this up, but I just want to let everyone know that if ain't nobody told you, they love you. I love each and every one of you today, unconditionally. Thanks for letting me share.
Hey, Will.
He said, you know, I kind of felt jealous when he was talking about his sponsor was here. And
That's the first thing I did when I got here. You know, I called my sponsor. So to let him know what this place was doing for me. And wishing he was here. You know, because my sponsor is not just my sponsor. Over the past few years, he became my best friend. He's the type of person that he never, ever beat up on me. He allowed me to make my mistakes. And after I went to him crying, he said, okay, you made a mistake, let's find a solution. And that's all he would do, and we would work on the solution. Because me being an addict, I could beat up on myself better than anybody. And so I don't need that from other people. And sometimes I just needed him to listen. Knew the answer, but just needed him to listen. And that's what and that's why our relationship grew to where it grew to. And I remember having a year clean, and being real angry still. And I used to have this look on my face, like "don't fuck with me" type look when I went to meetings. And a lot of people they did that too. I'm going over there and give him a hug. But his guy would always give me a hug. No matter how I looked or how I might look like I was unapproachable, he always walked up with a big smile and gave me a hug. And that's what made me choose him to be my sponsor, because of the love he showed no matter what. And now I got sponsees. I got 7 sponsees. And most of them are new. I got one just a little over a year. But I got this one particular sponsee. He did not like me at all when we met. I mean, he did not like me. And I still would talk to him. And one day he asked me, he said, no, I asked him, I said, you don't like me, do you? He said, no. I said, but, he said, well, why do you keep bothering me? I said, because I see you was the same way I was when I first was here. You angry just like I was, and somebody had to show me some love.
And really, I seen him and, you know, me and him. And so I asked him, did he have a sponsor? And he said no. At this time, he probably had about 9-10 months clean. And he said, sarcastically, why don't you be my sponsor then? Thinking I would turn him down. And I said, okay. And he didn't follow any of the suggestions. Not a one. And he had this one problem. He kept going out tricking. And I said, you know, one day, one of them girls gonna get in the car with you and she gonna have a rock, and getting high just ain't gonna seem like a bad idea. And a week before I told him that, he relapsed. Right after, a week after that. And I kept calling him. I would call about once a week. And he was never at home. And only I would just ask two questions: is he alive? And or is he in jail? And his girlfriend would say, no, he's not in jail. He's still alive. I said, just tell him I called. And that just went on for about 6 months. And one day, another one of my sponsors spotted him at a meeting. And he said, yeah, I seen him at a meeting. I asked him, did he call you? And he said he hadn't called yet. But I was just glad to hear that he was at a meeting. That's the only thing I was glad about. And about a week later, he called. And he said, I heard you was back. He said, yeah, I've been back about a week. He said, but I only got one thing I want to know. I said, what's that? He said, why did you keep calling? He said, when I started using, nobody called anymore. Nobody wanted to be bothered with me. But you kept calling. He said, I would come home and she would tell me you called, and immediately my high would just disappear. And I never could figure out why you kept calling. He said, and you calling actually was the reason why I came back, because I couldn't even enjoy getting high no more, knowing that you kept calling. You know, and I told him, I said, I never stopped loving you because you was using. I never stopped. I said, I felt like, even, I'm the type of person that has so much faith in this program. I believe once you get this program, you can never be the same again. I don't care if you go back out. I just what I believe. And I believe if I kept calling, I said that was the whole purpose of me calling, to make you feel like you felt, in hopes that you would come back before you killed yourself. And he said, that's the only thing. He said, well, it worked. And he came back with a whole new attitude. He started following all the suggestions. He started making meetings. He started calling me. You know, we just got extremely close together. And I remember one time he called, and I wasn't at home, and the other person answered the phone, and it was like, tell him his sponsor called. And she said, well, which one? And he said, immediately I got jealous. He said, I forgot that you have more than one sponsor. He said, but just tell me I'm your favorite. You know, that'll make me feel better, you know. But that's the type of relationship, you know, through the love of this program, because that's what was shown to me. And that did so much for me, having that relationship with that sponsor. And you know, and I have, you know, and he is kind of my favorite because he was the hard-headed one. You know, it's like the bad kid that never would mind and all of a sudden started minding. And so it was that type of relationship. And I really thank God for that. You know, if you don't have a good relationship with your sponsor, you know, it's real important that you get one. Because with my sponsor, I can talk to him about anything. My sponsor have gotten out to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning when I called crying at him just to see if I was all right. And there's nothing he wouldn't do for me. And the things I told him, I never heard at another meeting. Nobody never came to me and said, I heard this. I know the things I told him he would take to the grave with him. You know, and vice versa. You know, when something's happening to him, I'm the first person he called. And I wouldn't give my relationship up with my sponsor or my sponsees for anything. And that's a big part of why I'm here. You know, that's a real big part. that helped me understand the we part of this program so much that it gave me just that much more courage. And your sponsees will make you work the steps too, because when they start asking questions, you feel like you gotta have the answers, you know. And I'm gonna say this in close, you know, when you're looking for a sponsor, I'm gonna tell you like what they told me. Make sure you find a sponsor that's not only going to meeting, but make sure your sponsor have a sponsor, because this is a we program. See, that's the part they didn't tell me. They said get a sponsor, but they never said make sure your sponsor got a sponsor. Because when my sponsor don't have the answer, he called his sponsor. And if his sponsor don't have the answer, then he called, and that's how it works. You know, we recover collectively and together, and that it works. And it's really a shame how you got a lot of people with multiple years of recovery. It's a lot of them don't have sponsors. It really is. They got it, I guess, you know, and that was real important to me to see how my sponsor works with his sponsor, and that what gave me the faith and the hope in him, because I said, well, he's trying to get better too, you know, he ain't perfect, he still need help too, you know, so that keeps me keeping him up on that real high pedestal that sometimes we put people on, knowing that he's still seeking recovery. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks a lot. Got a couple minutes left. It's like 2 to 10. 10 o'clock.
Okay, hi family, I'm an addict called Pam. I just like to share a little bit on the solutions, the steps. I guess I just need to say, you know, that I was sitting here listening, and you know, this step thing has really just like become real overwhelming to me. I've got like 6 years clean, and I think I've worked my you know, I've gotten as far as my 6th step. Then I changed sponsors, and we started over, and now I'm back to my 4th step. And you know, the only struggle with this step is me. You know, I'm having a, you know, I say I'm having a problem. You know, I'm not really having a problem. I just didn't have the willingness. You know, afraid to find out what's going on with me. Don't want to look at it. Or don't know what I'm going to find out about me. You know, and all of a sudden, you know, I just got this real strong desire to work this step. You know, so as tired as I claimed I was yesterday, you know, by the time I got back to my room, took a shower, you know, my notebook and my step is sitting up on the shelf. And it's like, and I look over at it, I'm like, nah, I want to go to sleep, you know. So I said, oh, what the hell am I going to do? You know, and I prayed. You know, and this time when I prayed, it was a different prayer than before. You know, it was like, you know, God, you know, I really want to do this. You know, reveal to me the things I need to know about me. Reveal to me, you know, the things that I don't want to see in me. You know, help me this time. Help me be real with myself. And it's funny because my sponsor gave me this step, I don't know how long ago. And well, PJ, because that's my nickname. PJ, you really ought to come to the library with us on Mondays because we do step work. Yeah, I'll be there. You know, and my sponsorship family, we're real close. We are really close, and regardless of what I do, what I go through, nobody's beating me up. You know, my sponsor just looks at me and says, steps. And she'll leave it alone. She won't beat it into me. She'll steps. You know, and I always had a reason, an excuse or something. I don't have time. I don't have this, I don't have that. Well, I've been like off work for like 2 months. I got laid off for 2 months, and I'm still running around talking about I don't have time. I'm always busy, but busy doing what? You know, job hunting. Yeah, I job hunt. I need to be honest about it. I job hunt at it. You know, resume here, fax it there, whatever. But you know, the thing is I'm so busy running so that I don't have time, so I can keep making excuses for not doing this stuff. you know, and and it's just like, you know, a friend and I've been talking. This another addict shared with me. You know, when the pain gets great enough, and I looked at him like, damn. Oh, my sponsor keeps saying that to me. You know, when the pain gets great enough. Yeah, I heard that before, but it's the truth. And it's not really that I'm in so much pain. It's now that I'm ready. You know, I'm just ready to know about me and where I'm going. You know what? You know, I love this program. You know, if it wasn't for this program, when I lost my job, I probably would have started doing other things.
Yeah.
You know, seriously. You know, but now it's like, you know, I got to keep at it. You know, I wonder why so many things are going on in my life. And I hear you guys share about, yeah, I worked the steps and I got the solution to this and I saw this. And, you know, all the time I've always been like, yeah, I'm sure you got the solution. You know, I believed that this was a wonderful thing happening, just I didn't know how to do it. So, well, it's not going to work for me. I'll do it this way. I'll do it my way, you know. And even when I was in great pain last summer, do you think I would pick up my pen? No. I did other things. But the pain was still there. You know, I never worked through the pain. You know, I just stuffed it, suppressed it. You know, so now that I guess I've somewhat gotten through it, I'm getting through it better now because now I'm writing about it. I'm looking at it. And I felt some things last night when I was writing because like it came up out of my head and on this piece of paper and there was some relief. The relief I didn't think I would be able to feel or that I wouldn't recognize because you know I'm different. You know, I'm different. You know, things don't work for me that work for you guys. You know, yeah. But I just felt the need to get up here and share that, and I pass. Thanks.
Thanks, Penny. Okay, I'm Ken, recovering addict. Just real quick, you know, this weekend's a real special weekend. I came for my first time here 2 years ago, and then for the last 2 years I couldn't come. And I was able to make it this weekend. I'm really glad I did. And I'm gonna hate to leave. I'm gonna have to leave tonight. My I'm in a lot of pain. My back's hurting real bad. Same with my leg. But it's been a great time, and it's good to see everyone I love. So, well, with that, can we get up in a group hug and close the surrender prayer?